Flare-ups of pain when you have Achilles tendinopathy or tendonitis is extremely common because it's just not possible to always pitch your rehab and your activity levels at the perfect level. Now, in this video, I want to explain to you, first of all, that pain does not equal severity of injury. Then we're going to look at why do flare-ups happen, and does it actually mean that you've made your injury worse when you have an increase in pain? And lastly, I'll share some tips on how you can best manage your flare-ups, that you can get over them quickly and carry on with your rehab or your sport. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from treatmyachilles.com, where you can get online physiotherapy assessment as well as treatment for your Achilles injuries. Have a look at the description of this video if you want a link to our website. It's quite normal for, if your injury is really painful, to think that it must be really, really bad and it means something dangerous. But interestingly, the research has shown that that is not the case. What we found in studies these days is that people can have an injury and they'll have some pain, but people can also have no injury and have pain, and people can have an injury and no pain. And also, sometimes you can see an injury on a scan when you first scan it, but then the injury recovers, but you rescan it, injury's gone, but the person is still in pain. So what on earth is going on here? What researchers now understand is that pain is only an alarm system in the body, and that this alarm system sounds louder under certain circumstances. It can also get out of sync, that it can cause a lot more pain than what you should have, or it can not cause enough pain. The reason for this is that our brains don't just look at tissue damage when it decides how dangerous this injury is for you. It looks at all things that can threaten your survival. And guess what else threatens our survivals or makes us upset? Things like if we can't do our sport, that really upsets you. If you perhaps can't do your job because of your injury, that will have an impact and make you frightened, and that will make your pain levels feel higher. Also, research has shown that if you have pain for more than 3 months, your body actually becomes better at creating pain and sounding off the alarm system at even less and less input. So how this works is, whenever any part of your body has a certain number of receptors that tells you stuff about chemicals in that area, so inflammation, pressure on that area, stretch on that area, and it's only when those receptors get stimulated above a certain level that they sound out loud enough that the brain interprets it as an injury or pain. And it tells you, "Hoi, take note of what's going on there." And the idea is that it increases your survival. But now, if you have pain for more than 3 months, what they've shown is that you actually get more pain receptors in that area. They fire off at a much lower input level, and they create a much bigger response. And the brain becomes more sensitive to anything it feels in there, even if it's not something that's dangerous. To give you an example of this, if I just press my finger like this, it's not going to hurt. I can feel strong pressure, but it doesn't cause pain. If I whack it with a hammer, now that's going to cause pain because it's pressure above the level that my brain thinks is safe, and that's quite clever. But now once I've whacked it with a hammer, if I just gently touch it, I'm not touching it hard enough to make the injury worse, I'm just gently touching it, it can cause a lot of pain. And anybody who's been silly enough to whack their fingers with hammers will know what I'm talking about. So in this case, the pressure I'm applying is not actually causing any extra damage, and it's not really dangerous, but my brain is on high alert going, there's something seriously wrong with that. We don't want anything else to happening with that. Plus, the receptors are now more sensitive. They fire off more quickly. So this also happens for the Achilles tendon. If the receptors in that area is now on high alert and your brain is very worried about that injury, so that's on high alert, it creates a much bigger pain response than what there is actually tissue damage for. And an interesting study that's recently come out has shown this to be true for the Achilles tendon as well. So what these researchers did was they scanned a large number of people. I think it was 145 participants. And what they wanted to see was, how well does the pain levels and activity levels of the people correlate with how much damage they have in their tendons when they scan the tendons. And they found that they could put people into 3 categories in that study. The first category of person that they identified were people who were quite active, so usually people still playing their sports or doing high levels of activity, who reported some tendon pain, but they could keep up with their activities. And when they scanned these people, or first of all, when they tested them doing strength tests like heel raising exercises, they found that they had pretty good endurance and could do quite a few of those repetitions. And when they scanned their tendons, they found that only a very small portion of the tendon had structural damage, and it wasn't that much damage. Now, the second group of people they identified had lots of pain, and they reported being really worried about the tendon, and lots of the psychological type worries that has been shown to increase pain were reported by this group. They also weren't that active because they were too frightened to make their pain worse. And when they performed the heel raise test, they could do a fair number of them, but they couldn't do nearly as many repetitions as the guys who were really active. When the researchers scanned these people's tendons, surprisingly, they found that actually they showed very little structural damage and it was only a tiny part of the tendon that was affected. So even though they had really lots of pain associated and they found that it really impacted their activities, they didn't have much structural damage. The third group didn't really have that much pain to report, but they were also really not very active. They were even less active than the people who reported having a lot of pain. They performed really badly on the strength test. So when they asked them to do single leg heel raises or heel raises, even double leg ones, they couldn't do many repetitions because they were just not strong enough. And when they scanned these people's tendons, they found that, okay, these guys actually had a lot more structural damage in there compared to the previous two groups. So what we see from here is that what you feel in your tendon does not correlate to your strength or to how much damage you have in your tendon. So why do flare-ups happen? Now, when that area is injured, it becomes more sensitive like we've just seen, and it has a decreased capacity to cope with load. What does that mean? It just means that you will be able to do less activities that loads your Achilles tendon. So we're thinking walking, running, jumping, climbing stairs, because it will take less load before the pain response is triggered. Now, if you continuously work into pain and trigger that pain response, it just keeps the cycle going and it becomes more and more and more sensitive over time. The injury doesn't necessarily get worse, but the sensitivity gets worse. So you can actually decrease that sensitivity over time by applying load management or relative rest. So that means that you bring all your activities down in the day to a level that doesn't increase your tendon pain, plus pitching your rehab exercises at the right level. That over time, the more you do the activities just to that level that's a little bit uncomfortable but doesn't really push your pain up higher, it actually decreases the sensitivity of those pain receptors over time and your load tolerance increases. Of course, the exercise also helps to strengthen your tendon back to the level you need. Some of the common reasons that people experience flare-ups is if they increase their activity levels too quickly. So for instance, you've now given a bit of relative rest, you feel better, and then you suddenly go and walk 5 kilometers. Whereas actually, you've only been walking about 1 kilometer all this time. And it's just because the difference between the load that the tendon is currently used to and the load you're asking it to do is such a big difference that the brain goes, this must be dangerous. And it goes, I'm going to create pain for you. Then also, if you use weights that's too heavy, same principle, or do too many repetitions. If you increase the intensity of your activities too quickly, like for instance, you're used to running now, but then now all of a sudden you start doing lots of fast running sessions or too many hill running sessions. That can actually, or it's just a question of, it's not the number of sessions you're doing that's too many. You actually just run too fast when you start doing fast running sessions instead of incrementally increasing that. The question that everybody always asks themselves when they get injured or when they experience a flare-up is, man, did I now make my injury worse and have I put myself back to square one? Well, of course you can make your injury worse if you do too much on it compared to what it's used to, but if you've not experienced a sharp sudden pain while you were doing the activity, and when you look at what actually caused the flare-up, it was only a small increase compared to what you're used to, and or it may even be the same type of activity you normally do, it wasn't a massive different thing, then you likely didn't injure your tendon any further. It is just the sensitivity in the tendon that's flared up. And it can be quite fickle. It can flare up for very easily without much reason. And the reason I say you've likely not made your injury worse is if that activity is not much more than what you usually do, it means your tendon was strong enough to cope with it. It wasn't too hard for it that it will actually cause structural damage. However, if you did feel a sharp sudden pain, it might mean that you've torn something, so you have to get it checked by a physio. And if the activity was a lot more than what you've been doing in the last few weeks or months, then yes, of course, you could have made your injury worse. But in most cases of flare-ups, I find that it's actually just a case that the sensitivity increased rather than that the injury is worse. What to do when you have a flare-up? How can you get rid of it in the quickest or the shortest period of time? Step number 1 is do not try to train through a flare-up. Now, I know, especially with Achilles rehab, you can be so invested in the process. You've put so much work into it. You're so used to doing your strength training 2 or 3 times a week, and you never miss it because you really want to get better. So it can be mentally really, really tough to say, I'm actually going to take a step back and rest my tendon because that is what it needs at this moment. If you're going to try and train through it, you're just going to continuously press on that bruise, keep on irritating those pain receptors, and your pain will just get worse, and that will really demotivate you. So take a step back and reduce the load on that tendon. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to rest completely. It may just mean that you need to switch back to low load exercises or low load activities for a few days until your pain has calmed down, and your physio will be able to help and assist you with that to decide what is the best thing for you to do. Also, when you then go back into your strength training, again, people often feel that, well, I want to start back with what I last did in my session, but that would be a mistake because you've not lost strength, but that sensitivity is now heightened, so it's going to shoot off pain signals at a much lower load than what it was doing before. So you have to start with a reduced load when you go back to your strength training or even your running, depending on what caused the flare-up, and just slowly build up from that. Now, this may sound like, back to square one, but actually, if you do it correctly, if you offload it quickly and then slowly ease back into it, I find most people can get back to their normal training before they had the flare-up within a week or 2. So what I usually tell my patients, because there's no magic way to know what weight it will now tolerate, is I get them to first offload really low load exercise for a few days. Okay, then they feel, I think I'm ready to start strength training. I get them to do a really light session first. Now, depending on where you are in your rehab, if you've been doing quite heavy weights, I tell them to do 50% of the weight that they were used to doing. If you just started with weights, I would tell them to start with double leg heel raises, no weights, or single leg heel raises, no weights first to test that, and then see if they can incrementally build it again. Now, when you increase your weight again, say for instance, you tested a 50% session, you went, reacted quite well. My 24-hour response the next day was absolutely fine. Then, of course, you don't have to go up in tiny little kilos to get to your previous height again. You can go, okay, it felt absolutely fine. I think I can now try a 70% session from my previous one to see how it copes with that. When you hit that point where you think, I think this may be the point, then that becomes your baseline. And you start training at that level again and just ease slowly up from that then, like you did before. But in most cases, like I said, usually people can get back to what they were doing before the flare-up within about 2 weeks. Some things that you can do to help you get through that flare-up as well is if you wear shoes, go back to wearing shoes with a heel or with a heel lift in it, just for a few days, so you take that strain off the tendon, that it can just really calm down. Using short sessions of icing it for 5 to 7 minutes at a time. Remember, wet towel in between your skin and the ice can help to calm the pain down. But then also doing low load exercises, like just gentle double leg heel raises, can help to get the circulation going, get rid of the chemicals that's causing the pain, and just improve things in there so that you can feel more comfortable. Excellent. Hope you found that useful. And remember, if you need more help with your injury and want some assistance in figuring out how to get through your flare-ups, you're welcome to consult one of our team via video call. The link to the website is in the description of this video. Take care.